Good afternoon. My name is Jimmy Torres Velez, porque tengo madre. Y voy a estar moderando este panel extraordinario de gente. Hola, Cristina. De diferentes partes en los Estados Unidos. My name is Jimmy Torres. I'm the moderator of this panel. We're going to discuss voter engagement, how we get people to vote. And we have today Victor Leandry from Lorain, Ohio. Councilwoman Wildaliz Bermúdez from Connecticut, that's Hartford. Hartford, and my good friend here from Philadelphia. And we all do this for living, I guess. Some people get paid, some people don't. But this is our life, to get people to vote, to get people to participate. So we're gonna have the conversation, and the way we're gonna, instead of because we are all friends, we're gonna share all the, because I'm from Florida, so there's different states here that are important. So we're gonna all share information with you and have a conversation of the challenge. So let's go first with Rafael Collazo, which is ¿cuál es tu título? So
I am the National Director for Political Campaign for UnidosUS, formerly National Council La Raza. So La Raza has a political director, que es Boricua from Philadelphia, de raíces orocovis humanas.
Are you the first Puerto Rican
in that role?
In that role?
Probably so.
So now we should welcome the first Puerto Rican and the national organization. Well, that's one of the challenges that we have. How we make sure that the voices of Puerto Ricans are heard in national organization and in the groups that are operating in that different areas. So we're gonna start with Rafael.
Thank you so much. Gracias, Jimmy. Jimmy, the only thing I would amend Jimmy's remarks is this is not just a conversation amongst, this is a conversation not only amongst friends, but it's una conversación entre familia. And I think the last 8 or 9 months post the hurricane shows that, if anything, it proves how much of a family this nation of Puerto Ricans, not only in the island, but throughout the diaspora, which is the focus of our conversation today, is. Thank you, Jimmy. Your leadership, not only particularly in Florida, but on the island and throughout the Puerto Rican diaspora, is admirable. Some people say they dedicate their lives to our community, but Jimmy is truly living, as they say in hip hop, living the lyrics. So, gracias, Jimmy. I would just say I want to thank Dr. Edwin Melendez and his staff for bringing us together for the 3rd time. These are some of the most important conversations we can be having. And the caliber of people like the Councilwoman and my dear friend Victor Leandry that have come together for this is, it truly makes this time special. I would just say, just sort of big picture, and then I want to hear from all of you and our fellow panelists about some other local perspectives and Jimmy's Florida expertise. But I think to me, there's 3 truths that we know now going into the focus of our conversation. The first is the Puerto Rican electorate in the United States mainland has already made steps forward. And I think you can go back to 2012, where statistically, President Obama may not have pulled out of election if it wasn't for the Puerto Rican electorate in Florida and Pennsylvania, and potentially even some places like Ohio, where we were a critical swing vote. So we have to give ourselves a little credit for that. I also don't think, if we have any New Jersey friends, I don't think we have an African-American and a Cuban-American senator in New Jersey without the Puerto Rican vote in New Jersey. So let's give ourselves some credit. I think the second piece is that even if the hurricane never happened, or the hurricanes never happened, we still would be sitting here talking about the importance of nonpartisan civic engagement work, voter registration, voter mobilization. The problem, if you identify the biggest issue impacting Puerto Rican mobilization in the mainland United States, some would argue candidates, some would argue we don't have enough sabor in our get out the vote efforts. I would argue, if you just look at it statistically, it's not turning out Puerto Ricans that are registered to vote. It's the fact that depending on each community, and I'm sure the Councilwoman has estimates, Victor has estimates, Jimmy has estimates, but roughly half of our community currently living in the mainland United States that are 18 and above and are eligible to vote are not even registered. So we're doing a pretty solid job turning out voter. We could do better, but generally speaking, in major general elections, we're doing a pretty fair job turning out Puerto Ricans registered to vote. The problem is a big chunk of our community, because of youth, because of displacement, transiency, and poverty, are not even registered, not even in the game. So we can't hold ourselves accountable to turning out people that are not even on the rolls. So that the displacement of Puerto Ricans from the island even makes this situation more acute. And so that's why this conversation is even more important in 2018. The last thing I'll say in my opening remarks is that beyond the civic engagement work, we have seen post-hurricane that the Puerto Rican diaspora is very capable about advocating for our community. The philanthropic, and I don't know if anyone will truly know, the amount of money that we pulled out of our pockets, the amount of goods and services that we mobilized, and the amount of time and expertise that Puerto Ricans throughout the diasporas have continued to give to the island and its residents and those now who are now in our communities is probably a pretty astronomical number. And we've seen, and I would point to Connecticut specifically as a place from a local perspective where local advocacy, there aren't two members in the US Senate that are more in front of the issue of Puerto Rico than the two senators in Connecticut. And is it part of it that they're progressive and they're nice people and they know they have Puerto Ricans in their community? That's part of it. But I don't think that happens if Boricuas in Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Willimantic don't get out and get in these senators' ears. And I know all of you from Florida throughout the diaspora have been doing so in the same way. So the advocacy energy is there, and now it's time to harness that energy to mobilize our community in a historic fashion during a midterm election.
Thank you, Rafael. Wildaliz?
Yes. Hola, buenos días o buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Wildaliz Bermúdez. I'm on the Hartford City Council in Hartford, Connecticut. And as the capital city, I just wanted to share with you a little bit of what the demographics look like and what it looks like on the ground for us right now. So, but first, to start a little bit, me and my background. I was born in Jabucoa. My parents came to the US when I was just a baby, and the place that I have known as home has been Hartford. So I was raised in Hartford. At an early age, I was introduced to activism by my parents enrolling us as part of the Chef versus O'Neill landmark desegregation case. Fast forward, and now I continue this level of activism on the city council. And I serve as the Working Families Party minority leader. So, and in terms of Connecticut, you know, people always say, Connecticut, well, they have a lot of perceptions about Connecticut. Oh, it's quiet, it's boring, very preppy, very prestigious, et cetera, home to the Yaleys. But the reality of Connecticut is that while it does have the highest per capita income, it also has the biggest gap in terms of wealth distribution in the country, right? And so there's a lot of wealth disparity. So in a place like Hartford, this means that our capital city, our median income is $29,000 a year. That's just what it is. According to Connecticut itself, the last study that was conducted by Centro, which was in 2014, we have about 300,000 Puerto Ricans, but the number of Puerto Ricans is certainly a lot higher now, and they say that it's closer to the 600,000 range in terms of numbers of Puerto Ricans that live in Connecticut. And so our cities like Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, which I'll be mentioning them throughout today, those are the hubs where Latino populations live in. And so our cities are primarily communities where communities of color reside, and where we know that we have a very large number of Puerto Ricans who live there. And so if we take, for example, Hartford alone, our public school system has 65% enrollment of Latino students. Most of them, this is in Hartford public school system, and most of them are Puerto Rican students. And so all of this are very important factors as we talk about the importance of our voting bloc, right? And so if we look at the Latino population in Connecticut, Puerto Ricans in Connecticut hold the biggest voting bloc, and we have a lot of power in that. But with that also comes, how do we really activate the base that we have? There's a lot of voter apathy. There's a lot of people who are so frustrated with the system and the inequalities and not seeing things move. And I could also point to Hartford itself, where we have a very, very just off the charts, very low voter turnout rate, especially when it comes to things like our own Board of Education elections, right? When it comes to the federal elections, we have a better rate, but typically our voter turnout rate when it comes within our own structure, it's between 5% to 10% of a voter turnout rate. And so the conversation also is about how do we activate and retain the voters that we do enroll. And so all of this coupled with right now, where we are in a defining moment because Hurricane Maria hit, and we have seen record number, especially in Hartford, record number of Puerto Rican families who have come from the island to Hartford and calling Hartford now their new home. Many of them not wanting to return and wanting to really stay for many reasons, whether it's economic reasons, what's happening on the island with Promesa, educational reasons, because there's over 200 schools that are closing on the island. And so, and also for medical reasons. So there's a list that just keeps growing. As you've seen, I'm sure on the ground yourselves, and we can all attest to this, there have been various relief centers, either formally or informally set up. And these relief centers have been the primary place where a lot of the families are going to. And something that we started to implement very early on was at these relief centers, whether they were formal or informal, to start registering folks who have been arriving from Puerto Rico. So our relief center in Hartford saw, when it was first implemented in November, all the way through March 15th. And I say March 15th because after that date, there was no more funding to have the relief center open, but we're gonna open a new one, no worries. So we saw over 1,805 people who came in, who were calling now Hartford their new home. And so there's a bigger context in terms of how do we really use this new breath of people who are really in Puerto Rico, they have a great voter turnout rate. How do we make sure that we retain them and we help them to transition and navigate this new system politically, but also immediately address the concerns and the needs that they have on the ground. So those needs and concerns right now we have two various groups, right? Those individuals who have been placed who are living with their relatives versus those individuals who came here, some of them where FEMA paid for their flights to be able to stay as TSA, through the TSA vouchers, temporary shelter assistance vouchers, in hotels temporarily until they were able to transition. So those two groups are the two tracks that they're in, but they have immediate needs between housing, employment, educational needs. And so there's a whole list of things that have to be addressed in forming committees as these families become more used to their new home, and then escalating from there to engage them and activate them as people who want to be more immersed in what's happening on the ground in their new community. So that was a big picture, but also for now.
We just have a good picture of Connecticut. Thank you very much. Victor Leandry from Lorain, Ohio.
So let me give you also, I'm 52. I have lived 26 years in Puerto Rico, 26 years here in the United States. So I have seen both part of elections, you know, how the community engaged in election. My birth certificate say I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but I say I was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico. But we know the story. My father was a military and he was just enrolled in the military. He was just getting out of the military, divorced my mom, raised by a single mom in a very poor community. Moved here in 91, and now I lead the only Latino organization in Lorain, Ohio. Lorain, Ohio have a very strong connection with Puerto Rico, and not a lot of people understand that. Lorain, Ohio is like 30 miles away from Cleveland, Ohio, and it was the first US Steel mill in the Midwest that after the war, they didn't have enough manpower and hired a general to go to Puerto Rico and recruit 500 Puerto Ricans. So imagine in the 40s, going to Puerto Rico and bringing 500 Puerto Ricans at once to work in a US Steel. So in the 40s, Lorain, Ohio was known in all the Latino community, especially the Puerto Rican, it was the place to go to work and make good money. So people, it was, so now we live in a community. The picture is not the same. The economy, the US Steel has closed, all the factory has closed. Now it's a very poor community. We don't have the numbers like say New York, Connecticut, but we have the number to make a significant impact. Nobody should make a decision in our community without the Latino community. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but nobody should be. They should be asking, instead of asking their party if they're running, they should be asking the Latino community, should I run? Because we should be having the control. We make 30%, this is before the Hurricane Maria, we make 30% of the city is a Latino community. Out of that 30%, at least 85% is Puerto Rican. At least 85%. So, you know, it's extremely a Puerto Rican community. And then you have Cleveland, that is almost the same picture. So you have the north part of Ohio that is controlled and have a very predominant Puerto Rican community. The rest of Ohio is more Mexican. You have their own company chow in Cincinnati, Mexican in Toledo, Johnstown is a little bit of both, Mexican and Puerto Rico, but the north part of Ohio is predominant Puerto Rican. We have seen the impact of the new families. We haven't seen a lot like other big cities. We only have welcomed close to 1,000 people, like 300 families to our community. But those 300 families make a significant change when you only have a community of 64,000. So a whole 1,000 adding to that, the school system is 40% of the school system is Latino, 40%. And now you're adding maybe another 500 students to that school system. So we have a community that really have a political power that they don't understand. And just things that we know. Let's talk about things that we know. We know that Latinos were very important in the 2012. We know, we already heard 2016, Puerto Ricans again, but the posts that we are living without counting, for me, in my community, those are the issues, not the voter registration in our community. I'm not saying, when we all saw the map yesterday when we started, all those small communities, Latino community, starting to pop up now and emerge and all over. Some of us, like in Lorain, we have the structure, but we don't have the capacity or the or the finance to really help mobilizing. Think about that. We are the only Latino organization in a community that has 30% Latino. So we are looked at like, everybody thinks that we have to be involved in that. We're involved. That's why in Ohio, they think we're the best Latino organization, but we're involved in health, voter registration, census, education, immigration. So everybody look at us like, you need to be involved. And we are, but we don't have the capacity to really mobilize the community in regards to voter registration. We can register them, but we cannot mobilize them to vote. And most of that has to do also with that we don't have a structure, we don't have a curriculum to really educate people that are moving, diaspora, about the government and the structure here in the United States. If you come from Puerto Rico to vote here, first of all, when I came, my personal opinion was when somebody told me you need to vote for presidential, and we all know Puerto Ricans go out to vote for presidential, they don't vote for nothing else. And they don't understand the connection of choosing a council that is Latino, choosing a state representative that is Latino. They don't make those connections. They don't understand that connection. When I came here and they told me that I needed to go for the presidential, I wanted to go, but I was expecting the day off. You know, in Puerto Rico, Obama went to Puerto Rico and say, in 2011 and say, we have, as a nation, a lot to learn about the structure of the voting in Puerto Rico. They take the day that we select our governor is a holiday. Nobody go to work. Everybody go and vote. Now you have here the the most powerful nation, and you have to vote for your president, you have to make the time to go to vote. I think that is designed to get people that need to work, people that financially cannot make it, people that doesn't have the capacity of transportation, people that doesn't have the language, people that doesn't have the education to go out and vote. That's why we're leaving that amount of voters without casting. But this is a design. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand the fact that when I walked into the poll for one of the primaries, somebody was asking me, from screaming at me, are you a Democrat or Republican? I'm like, in Puerto Rico, you don't have to care. That's my business when I go to vote. I remember picking up the phone and calling the election office and say like, listen, there's an issue. Somebody was screaming at me if I was Democrat or Republican as soon as I walked into the casting. There's a lot to learn from the Puerto Rican system that we don't use here. Now, how many of you have been in Puerto Rico for election time? Show of hand. Okay. Now, you have to know, I was telling one of I have one of my administrators, you're an administrator, I was born here. If you're in Puerto Rico, everything is saturated. You have in your language, Puerto Rico is so small. You're receiving everything in Spanish from the newspaper, from the comedy shows in TV, if you're receiving the information from all over, you know the people that are running because Puerto Rico is so small, you're connected. And plus, let's not forget the caravanas. Have you seen Google it or look for YouTube? I was showing my coworker and I was here, like, the political time in Puerto Rico is one of the most festive time, hands down. I'm not saying that it's the best in regards to it's stressful. It is sometimes violent. But it is the most festive time, hands down. By the time you go to vote, you're singing jingles that you're like, how am I gonna get this jingle out of my head? Like it is salsa, merengue. I was putting a few, and people are like, and you're starting to know your people, and people are out with their flag. As soon as you hear the music a mile away, you're getting your flag, and you're in the people. Candidates are shaking your hands and talking to you. We don't have that here. When somebody's coming from Puerto Rico and need to vote, and they don't know who's running for commissioner. What is a commissioner? What is a state representative? What is a school board? What is it like? What? Like, and they don't make those connections. They don't understand in the language. So we need, and I finish with this, and I don't have a lot of more notes, but we need a curriculum that is cultural diverse, that really connect people as soon as they get from Puerto Rico, and they can learn the structure here, and they can vote smart. I finish with this. We have our organization partnered with NALEO for election time. And for the last 3 presidential elections, we have served as the call center for Ohio and for the Midwest. We start at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 people, 6 telephones. You will be amazed on the calls that we receive on the day of the election. People ask, no, who should I vote for? Who should I vote for? Latinos calling, asking us, they're like, we cannot tell you, we can't tell you where to vote, and we want to tell them who they vote. They're not prepared. They might be even voting for the wrong person. Yeah. People are asking us, what should I take? The day of the election, an hour or 2 hours before the poll closed. We are answering call by call by call. People are calling us even from California. We're telling them where to vote, and they're like, could you tell me what is close to us? Like, no, we're telling you for Ohio. It's like, what? But calls are coming through our agency, like the day of the election, but some of the calls that we receive, it is embarrassing that our Latino community doesn't vote smart and doesn't educate themselves in regard how to vote. And I finish with that. I have a lot here. I have pages here, but I finished. That's part 1.
Thank you. So, if I may add to that, the ideas that you just mentioned, the involvement. I've been an organizer for the last 34 years of my life. So the one thing you learn as an organizer is that people have to be mad and agitate in order to do whatever.
Like I was right now. Okay.
Yeah. And what he just described is what Puerto Rico Puerto and other organizations are doing is create that passion to go and vote. So people and gringos need to understand that people have no passion for voting here. It's boring. It's very boring. My first experience with that was I was in a library, and this guy with a little Toyotita came like, oh, I said, what are you doing here? I said, there's an election going on. And he looked at the yard sign and said, oh, those are for election? You know, like so many names, so many positions. It's really embarrassing. You know, the way the parties and the consultants and all these people, they want people to understand that that's the only way to do campaigns. Because if you show some other way, they will lose their contracts. You have to understand this. When we present these ideas to people like high Goyetti people, so they are like, no, but you know, I remember I presented the idea of the flag to Charlie Crist in Florida. Said, took your sign, put it a palito, and create a flag. That's simple. And he was like, oh, people don't like that. Your people don't like that. But you're asking me if you want Puerto Ricans to come out and vote. This is the way. Yeah. So, oh, if you make a caravana, you want to make white people mad. I don't care. Okay. I'm here to mobilize the Puerto Rican votes. So if they're mad, they're mad. And then some other stuff that so there, and another point, the other day I was interviewed by Fox News. They sent somebody to Orlando to check, you know, what the Puerto Ricans are doing. You know, they're really worried. So I said, you know, I'm come from a country that we're so dumb that we have the pictures of the candidates in the ballot. So when you see a ballot, you say, oh, Ralph Morales, yes, that's the guy. I know him. I met him at the store. But when you are in front of a ballot that has 500 names, you have to remember which one is the one that you like. So what happened? People vote for the names that they recognize. That's why we end up with Donald Trump as president of the United States of America. He's a dumb guy, but he's the one that people knows. So that's why people voted for him. So we need to have a voice to change the system, to make ways, you know, because I think now we're talking about challenges, what you're saying is challenges, but it's also opportunities to make the changes and to put the changes out there in a way that we can take advantage. So big organization with money, like my brother here. So they need to partner with local organizations, small organizations, to help and bring the resources to the ground that we can do the work. Second round, go ahead.
So in terms of what are we doing now, and in terms of challenges, I would say there's a couple things. One is that, and Jimmy should chime in about Florida specifically, but I think one of our biggest challenges is our capacity outside of Florida. So a lot of the civic engagement donors, some of the progressive donors, Florida, even though we have our challenges, we all have our challenges with funding Florida where we need to, that's a fairly easy sell. There's been a lot of publicity about our community in Central Florida. A lot of the political journalism classes bought into this idea that the Puerto Rican vote in Florida is a thing that they should be covering. In places like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, not nearly as sexy to them. So I think that I think we would agree there's a collective challenge with fully building capacity to mobilize our community throughout the diaspora. I think the other thing, which I think we have an opportunity to build upon, but is still a challenge in our communities, and Victor sort of alluded to it, as 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organizations like UnidosUS, like Victor's organization, Centro, you know, we're very limited on what we can say for obvious legal reasons. So we can tell people sort of generally speaking, it's important for Puerto Ricans to come out to vote for respect, and we always try to come up with these, you know, culturally competent, penetrating taglines, but at the end of the day, it's very vague. And so one of the things that I would encourage all of your communities to think about, and some of us are starting to do this, is to create sister 501c4 advocacy organizations. And so that's not that difficult to do. It's basically very similar to the way you establish a 501c3 organization. You need a board, you got to do some, you know, some legal paperwork. But the bottom line is that while that money's more difficult to raise because you can't write that off on your taxes, at the same time, that vehicle gives you a lot more flexibility on the political work you can do and what you can say to our community. So I would just say that, and look, to put it in perspective, when Unidos didn't have a 501c4 until 2011 and didn't use it to endorse candidates till 2016. So this is a newer phenomenon in our community, but there's no reason why locally, and I know Jimmy's very aware of this, that we should be starting and building that capacity within our organizations, either as a sister organization to a current 501c3 or just separately. You can start your own and have a sister PAC with it. So that money's more challenging to raise, but it's really important that locally, and I know Jimmy's very, as am I, and I'm sure the councilwoman as well, local elections. And how do we build this next generation of leaders? And I think in terms of opportunities, look, everyone here is a lifer. We're going, Gretchen's here, Jimmy's here, Victor's here. We're going to do this hasta la muerte. We're going to care about our community and organize. We did this since we were 9, and we're going to do it until we go to the next level, next journey. But what has happened after the hurricane is now we have this new group of leaders that has gotten smacked in the face, particularly the Puerto Rican middle class here that thought things were kind of okay. Well, I got a house, I got a little land, I'm doing okay. And now realize, and not only the hurricane, but the response of this federal government, that we're not only, and this is a personal comment, colonized on the island, but on essentially in a colonial state here as refugees. So I think that we have an opportunity to develop their capacity so they can get involved in civic engagement, get involved in voter registration, get involved in, on the partisan side, helping elected officials like the councilwoman run themselves. But there's a whole lot of capacity we got to build. Because for every person I see on Facebook that says, oh, we got to register all these Puerto Ricans in Philly or Camden or Worcester, Massachusetts, I have a lot of basic questions. Do you know the rules how to register people in your community? Do you know where the forms are? Do you know how to quality control them? Do you have access to a voter file? Not that these people can't do the work, but we have to empower them with the tools. Because you're talking about a pretty large scale. Jimmy and I, and Jimmy's gonna tease me because we have the bigger group and smaller grassroots groups like Jimmy are hard. It's always a challenge to fundraise. And we even, for this work, have those challenges. But you can imagine people that are sort of one-off community activists not having those kind of resources. So how do we build that capacity in our community? And I think I think it's an opportunity, and I think, Jimmy, we could for you to chime in on this. We don't have the money we need collectively, but there are some resources that have come into Central Florida. So I think we'll have, if not, it won't be enough, but we will be able to collectively, I don't know, what do you think, Jimmy, 100,000 plus in terms of people, Puerto Ricans who can register in the corridor amongst all of us together, I think is, if not more. Yeah, so, and those are pretty consistent with the collective work that we have. And if people aren't familiar with Central Florida, there's probably about half dozen players at the table that are either Puerto Rican based or Latino based or labor based, pretty much, that are working together for the most part, pretty collaborative.
And I would chime in, we have to really capitalize on the people power. Again, we have to this is a really true defining moment that we're in right now. And we have to collaborate and bring people to the table that would otherwise not have been brought in. And so we understand, we recognize that, yes, people who have been here, and again, Hartford being an example, we have a low voter turnout rate, people are tired, they're saying, oh no, it's a little politica, I'm not interested. But at the same time, we have this new group of people who are coming in from Puerto Rico, new families and individuals who want to get involved. They are emailing us, they're calling us, they say, ¿en qué puedo ayudar? How can I get involved? And at the same time, we also have a group of young people who have been living here their entire lives, and they're saying, you know what, I'm fed up. How do I get involved? How can I get my feet wet? Where do I swim? How can I be part of your coalition? And so one of the things that we're seeing on the ground in places like Hartford is that the committees, the political party committees, and I'm gonna specifically call out the Democratic Party committee at the Hartford local level, this is what we're seeing, is that there has been the same group over the same decades, the same group that is consistently brought together the same group of people to do voter turnout rate, to have them involved at the committee level, to have them involved at the Democratic, the different neighborhoods that control the Democratic town committees. And nothing being done to really engage and revitalize and energize the young people who are saying, I want to get involved. And so that group and this is a perfect opportunity. It's a perfect opportunity. And in reference to the whole celebration and what we bring to the table in terms of our culture and our identity and our zest to really work with one another and just bring in a little spice to it, a little bit of salsa. there's really amazing ideas that have been tested in Connecticut, and Jason Ortiz can attest to this because he ran this campaign, where for one of the campaigns for a state representative, during the get out the vote, they actually rented a party bus, and they had a party bus picking up people, driving them to the polls, and they were playing parrandas inside the party bus. Amazing concept.
Yeah.
Drinking?
Right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there was any drinking involved. But and not only do you have young people, but you have the grandmothers who came out. Beyond that, the concept of having year-round canvassing. Sometimes, we get elected into office and we're like, okay, we're good, we're all set. But that's also really important to try to stay engaged. But it just shouldn't come from one person. It should be the actual people on the ground who say, okay, we want more accountability from our elected officials. They can form comités and they can do the door knocking and they can say, hey, this issue is coming up at the local school board, or this is happening right now. Did you know this? And so people power, right? So the people reclaiming their space and reclaiming their opportunity to hold those who are elected accountable. And then, of course, the last one is during the actual voting day itself, community block parties. What an amazing concept, right? Block off a street and have an actual block party. And all of that, I think, coupled together with so many other ideas that you guys have shared and so many of your ideas too, let's put some spin onto this, because right now is the moment.
So I will in regards to challenges and here again, the whole thing about learning how to vote and vote smart and not to vote just in presidential. I heard a lot from our community. They were not going to vote because they didn't like the two candidates. Like, your opportunity was many elections before to choose the candidate you want, and now you have A or B, but they were not voting. So a no vote is a vote. So that was an issue that heralds in Ohio, that they didn't vote, but that was a vote. You choose not to vote, you gave the power to somebody else. But let me support a little bit about the youth people. There's studies that show. Yes. There's studies that show that from 2012 to 2016, the Latinos gained 4 million votes, new voters. 3.2 came from young people that turned 18. So the other 800, we know from where it came, the diaspora that was moving because of the finance crisis. The same picture is going to happen for this election. We're going to gain again 4 million or 5 million because of the hurricane. Why? Because we keep hearing Janet Murguia from UnidosUS telling us that almost 1 million Latino is turning 18 every year until the year 2028. Imagine the power of that. 1 million Latino turning 18 every single year until 2019. So we know those numbers are going to be exactly the same. We're going to win 4 or 5 million new votes for the next election. And then there's studies also that show that younger generation doesn't come out to vote as older generation. So, well, I think that is going to change in the United States because of the whole gun control, and that's going to change. But our Latinos are not in that movement. And we have the DACA movement too, but we need to engage our Latino, especially the Puerto Rican. We need to connect them with a movement. Might be the Rebuild Puerto Rico, but we need to connect those young Latinos to a movement that they will get engaged and they will get on it and they will stay connected. Because if not, we're going to have the same problem that we're going to have. We're going to win 4 million votes, but are going to be people that are not going to go out and vote. And we need to think about those numbers and be smart about getting to the school or getting to the young people.
So, I want to add to the local elections, the role of the elected leaders as vectors to larger leaders. So if whomever, the senator from the state wants to go to Hartford, it would be introduced by her, to the audience. And that's an important time. When you have a local leader that is the one that introducing Obama or whomever. So promoting, our role is to promote Puerto Ricans to be in that ballot, Puerto Ricans to be elected, increase our capacity to talk to these people. So Servicios here from the University of Central Florida, So if he get elected as a senator in his university, then when the governor comes to the university, he will have an opportunity to talk to him. He will present the issues of Puerto Ricans. You understand? So there's some people that think like, oh, voting is stupid. Well, no, it's not. You know, it is important to vote. It is important to participate and to elect our people, even if they're not the smarter one or the Che Guevaras of the 22nd century. That's fine. They will get there. There's some people that start as not too good and end up to being great elected officials, because they learn. Actually, it's better not to know a lot and then you learn than to think that you know everything and then you don't learn anything. Final point is that I'm gonna take it. So to have an opportunity to have questions. El Centro, I hear that one of the questions that we have to address is what the Centro can do to help. So one of the thing that I heard from Victor and from me and others is that people need more information about the positions, the elected positions, what that means. And I think the other part is to have equivalents of what is a county clerk. That doesn't exist in Puerto Rico, a county clerk. So when you explain to people and you have somebody that have never lived in Puerto Rico, try to present the explanation. I've seen this with my own eyes. Somebody that have never lived in Puerto Rico tried to explain the clerk of the court to someone else. And I was like, you don't know what the hell are you talking about? You know, so the judiciary system in Puerto Rico is run by the Supreme Court. No other place in the United States have that. So when you try to make the explanation, it needs to be based on experience. So people will relate to that.
And might I add to that as well, not just what the positions are, but also, and someone mentioned this earlier, a scorecard. How well did they do with Puerto Rico issues or Latino issues,
Yes.
whether that's at the local, state, or federal level?
So who's doing that? You know,
Exactly.
because El Centro can bring the university vision and not personal opinions.
We're gonna start in our community, but if we have somebody that have the resource to do it, that would be amazing.
Okay, so please, I know Puerto Ricans, we can talk forever. Questions, because we have to be, we're gonna be out of here. Question first, and then the gentleman in the back. You start. You say you wanna ask questions. So after him, he's going to.
You know, this is a time that is not business as usual. And we can't tell the victims, hey, we need you out in the streets to vote. You know, because the president of the colonizing country was the one that disrespected it. I know, I've been here for 7 years. You know how many times I've had to stand up to the hubris and the arrogance of those that live in the greatest country in the world? So the thing now is to tell the people you have to fight for your people that are dying every day in this isla. And what is this doofus that's calls himself president? What did he do in Puerto Rico? He went there and you saw all the oligarchs around him, you know, the Tricky Rossellós and his friends looking at him as he's throwing paper. You know, and where were the elected officials in this country coming together and saying, this is not the way you address us?
Okay. Dear brother,
my question is, what are the politicians going to do to fix things in Puerto Rico? That is a shaky question. But look, the thing is, when you can deal with
the only politician here is her. So
one of the things that we're seeing on the ground, and thank you for your question. So the families that were displaced from Puerto Rico and had the TSA and were staying in the hotels, and there's still many who are staying in the hotels. So in Hartford, in a place like Hartford, we were able to identify them early on and to figure out what it was that they needed, what resources, how can we partner you with the right agencies, etc. But to your question, the beauty of that and having all the families in one place was having meetings on a weekly basis. bringing the families, bringing them to Washington, D.C. on several occasions so that they could meet with, at the federal level, congressmen and women who represented us in Connecticut so that they could advocate for the families who are, their own families who are still in Puerto Rico, and also the senators. Having meetings, we've had in Hartford, we've had various press conferences with Senators Blumenthal and Murphy at the federal level, holding them accountable, going over to Congressman Larson's office and saying, hey, Larson, it's March. We have been displaced and we have been here since November. Why haven't you met with us yet? And so on and so forth. And that's coming from the families.
And with the specific things like FEMA is not doing this and you're in the committee that supervises FEMA.
Exactly.
Things like that, I guess that's happening.
Yeah, I just had a
Question, please.
Yeah, just a couple of clarifying. I think it was you, Rafael, who mentioned 100,000 registered in the corridor. I just wanted clarity. Were you referring to the I-4 corridor in Florida, or you referenced the corridor?
Yeah. I was referencing the I-4 corridor. I think collectively, nonpartisan. I'm talking about what the parties may do. Is I think our collective load is roughly about 100,000. I expect that with various groups, including ours, including Jimmy's.
And that's new voters registered.
Yeah. Now, to that point though, and to referencing this gentleman's point, is that I would think that primarily the majority of those people are not going to be folks that necessarily just recently arrived, because again, we have this huge need anyway of people that are already moving to Florida, they're turning 18, or they moved from Orlando to Kissimmee, and now they have to change their registration. So
I would make a point of voting back there.
Jimmy, I want to earmark a conversation with you after this discussion, but also, where are these registrations being held? Are we giving our power away by not having our own band? Are we not having our own system where we are building our power, not giving it away to our sister organizations or folks that are allies? Because if we're registering voters under other folks, we might as well not do it. It's not ours. It's not our power.
Any comments?
The problem with that, the capacity, the people that do voter registration in Latinos communities that is not like New York are the non-profit. Non-profits that are run by 10 or 12 staff that are dealing with everything, and they don't have the capacity, they don't have the money. And when I think we do voter registration as much as we can when people come into the door and festivals, but in one of the best Latino organizations in Ohio, the capacity, my budget is $1 million. Compared with big cities. So the capacity, when you saw the map yesterday that Melendez was showing us, all those new Latinos community emerging, they don't have the financial, the capacity to do that voter registration themselves.
So I agree, and I'd like to pose in the role that I'm here as, there are solutions for this, and I think that, and Jimmy in specific, because we have many years in history, that we should talk about.
Definitely, we have to.
And a piece of that,
centralizing our power.
yes, and a piece of that puzzle is what I mentioned earlier, is about, if we already haven't done so, creating 501c4 organizations that not only can register people, not one group is going to register, everyone's going to do a piece, right?
Yeah.
But a 501c4 organization not only can build the capacity to have access to voter files of all the Puerto Ricans and Latinos registered in your community, regardless of who registered them, but then be able to message those voters in a way that you're not limited by being a 501c3 organization.
Yes. So another idea for El Centro is helping creating capacity in managing technology in election. When she mentioned band, that kind of thing is technology that they.
I'd be more than happy to be part of that conversation, because I think that brings up a whole other.
Gretchen.
It has to do with volunteers also. From
Yes.
Centro. Even the students.
Okay. No, Gretchen has her hand
Okay.
before, then.
Really quick.
Right here, then you, and then you.
Maybe I asked before a bunch of people.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, really quick, 2 observations and 1 question. On the score sheet that you're talking about, the National Puerto Rican Agenda with Jason, we talked about doing that for 2018. That's extremely labor intensive. You actually need a grant to hire somebody to do that. Okay, that's point 1. Point 2, we have all these organizations of acopio that were formed during Hurricane Maria. We have thousands in the nation. It is a huge challenge to flip them into voter registration type of outfits, because they do not want to mix with politics, because they associate politics in here with politics the way they're conducted in Puerto Rico. So, but we have already tons of organization. Okay, I'm just pointing out. Okay, now the question I have is, you do all this voter registration, you do all these nice things. How do we get our people into the national parties, both at the national campaign level, at the committee level, so that we're part of the decision making and part of the people that are appointed if they win? The Republican Party does a better job at this because they have fewer Puerto Ricans in them. The Democratic Party, I think, does a poor job at promoting Puerto Ricans, and so we need to get our Puerto Ricans in the elections, in the campaigns, so that we're campaigned by Puerto Ricans, and these people rise in the party structure. That's a challenge. How do we do that?
Oh, at the end, you put a question mark on it. That's a very, very good question.
No, it's actually, it's a legitimate question because I've been.
It's a very legitimate question.
Election cycle, I see this thing, una aplicación, I have worked all the time.
No, I just want to give opportunity to a lot of people to talk. So you want to address?
So I'm gonna defer to another panelist because you know why? Because I'm with the Working Families Party, so we don't send anyone to a delegation. And so if there's anyone here who can speak to that, or anyone in the audience, then I will defer to you because our structure is a little different.
Yeah,
we endorse Democrats.
I'm gonna make this comment as just a person in the community, not for my job because we're a 501c3 organization. It goes back to what the Councilwoman and Jimmy deal with every day. We have to start local. Everyone here, you're in Hartford, you're in Philly, you're in Tampa, you're in Cleveland. You have a bochincha story about the Puerto Ricans that are with the party that stink because they do whatever the party tells them, and the community people that are trying to bang their heads to try to break through this. That's where we have to start. That's where we have to start, because if we don't control our local, regardless of party, our local political structures with progressive people that are authentically accountable to the community, we're not going to, the people that get to the national level are going to be those same controlled people by the parties. So it really is a local question.
I agree with you.
So I have to continue.
Yeah, very important.
Question.
Are we going to have a platform by the National Puerto Rican Agenda? What are the points of convergence that Puerto Ricans demand from elected officials at the state level in Congress, like on housing, education, and so on? Number one, best practices then of how the African Americans in the churches deal with election day strategy, so that the chapters know what are the approaches and what are the issues that should be presented to the candidates, and how to manage these election day.
And as a member of the board of the National Puerto Rican Agenda, the answer is yes, we will have, but the chapters will decide which is the local call.
Good.
But they're wrong.
Just want to relate to the Lorain, Ohio person, Mr. Leandry. Question is, what happened to some, I know you described your agency as a funded program. Having been to Lorain, Ohio several times over many years,
Yeah.
I remember that there were viable community organizations that celebrated like the Puerto Rican Parade of Lorain. What happened to those groups?
Unfortunately, the dynamic with the whole economy has changed. The Puerto Rican community just closed the doors. We have an organization that is for advocate, that you have the old leadership that is in bochinches all the time, and people doesn't want to associate with them, and everything has deteriorated in a way for the Latino that is going down. And I know it's not answer your but we even have Latino candidates that are running for state, and this is my opinion on the count one. We have a Latino candidate that was selected as a state representative from our community that now is deciding not to run because the financial aspect of running a campaign is so hard for a Latino that he's like, I came here to advocate for Latinos, and I spent my 4 years campaigning for the other campaign. I'm gonna step down. And our Latino community says, what? But the Latino community also have the system to finance and support those people that we also need to develop. But
so how can the Puerto Rican agenda help that person?
So he already decided not to run, but there's other ones. But if you go to Lorain now, it's not the same Lorain that you saw many years ago. Now, in regards to nonprofit, we have developed a nonprofit now that is very strong compared with what you saw years before, and that now is the lead nonprofit in Ohio, and we have a president at a national level too. But the nonprofit have worked tremendously and have a different picture now, but the other structures fail because leadership.
Okay. So we have the room until 10 after 1. So, but we can stay because nobody's coming. But lunch is gonna be served. So if you want to stick around, we're gonna stick around with you for a while, so we don't have to rush the conversation. And I have to add to Victor. So if you think about that, Orlando have a lot of capacity. You know how many direct service organizations we have led by a Puerto Rican? One.
What's a direct service organization?
A direct service organization like this. Help with
With
cupones, or HIV, that kind of thing. So we have only one,
Food pantry.
you know, but we have a lot of organizations that are like volunteer organizations, but not fully funded. Hold on. Let me get the young man here, and then we'll go.
So it seems like there's a theme of we need to fight to control the power of our Puerto Rican vote, whether or not that's recent evacuees or long-established communities in Hartford or other areas. The question I have in my mind is, does it feel inauthentic or does it feel a little gross to approach these communities as soon as they land and say, you need to get registered, you need to vote for this platform, and we're going to tell you to vote for it? Or do we allow them to just, structuring this question so it'll be quick and easy to
And I know
understand.
where you're going, I have the answer.
So, I mean, like, you need to give them resources, get them settled, get them integrated, right?
It's a very
And so-
important ethical question.
Yeah, exactly.
So, to establish our power and to really heighten it, do we tell them to vote immediately, or do we kind
can.
of fight for the
You
Republican
can.
Party and Democratic Party
You
to
can.
give
You
us
can.
ways to?
I'm dealing with the same question. I have a committee right now. In my committee, Senator Brown staffer me, Venezuela councils me, state representative me, our council me. I have a committee I meet every week in my building that they come to help me reach how to help the Puerto Rican community. But they're all asking me, where are they? Let's register them to vote. Let's get them that. When you have a family that has lost everything, have a trauma, and have a mental health issue with them, you cannot tell them, hey, register to vote, because they are thinking, where I'm going to live, how I'm going to pay, how I'm going to get a uniform for my kids, how I'm going to get there because now I don't have transportation. Our first appointment in my agency with the family, it was taking 3 hours to my staff, 3 hours sitting with somebody, registering them for food stamp, trying to fill out application for housing. 3 hours. In 3 hours, you're going to tell them register to vote? Yeah. Unbelievable. You cannot do it. Morally, you cannot do it because they're crying, talking about how they lose their house, they didn't want to be there to start. They're displaced. They moved because of the hurricane. You cannot tell them in the first few.
I agree. I mean, people remember how you helped them, right? And so in a place like ours, we're dealing with the same thing, right? So there's housing issues, employment that they need to be taken care of. But I would actually, I would
we are registering.
Because I would register.
We register the
I would
vote.
do
We
the
register because for some of the services they need to register. But when you register, then you are not mobilizing that. It's the problem. We're not mobilizing.
Let's put this in another way. But the people that are making mistake is right there in their face. It's a drawing of the paper towel. That is right there. FEMA is doing nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Congress people can help with that. Okay. So we went to Congress and we saw somebody, congressman from Tallahassee, that sit in the committee that supervised FEMA. Okay. And we went to them and said, we have 10,000 Puerto Ricans that live in your district. He was like, how many? Understand? So we have an opportunity to talk to the people, the ones that were here before Maria, the ones that really cried and sent thousands and thousands of pounds of merchandise and money and everything from here. People love the island. I got se me paran los pelos. So it was amazing, the energy of the people. So we have to continue with that energy and taking them to vote. And the people that are coming are going to, some of the people are going to vote, some of the people are not going to vote. But we have enough people here, to make them, to win elections. Let me see, who's next? I think it's you. Yeah. No, sorry.
Jimmy, I just had a quick question of clarity on that. Registration, don't you need an address? Like they need to have a legal
They need a
address.
permanent
address.
So you can't register them right off the land.
Yes.
That's right.
No.
That's a really good
What?
But they can
Any
use like
address,
a friend's
any
address,
address.
or family member's address.
But if they end up going somewhere else, they're not.
Exactly.
They're going to, or they had to
But we
re-register
need to
them,
make
essentially.
sure
No, there's a
Yeah.
practical consideration.
our people are very smart.
Exactly, yeah.
So they cannot vote. They cannot vote in Puerto Rico here. Okay? That's illegal.
María,
The extra is not-
yo lo voy a hacer en
That's
español,
extra.
esa es la forma que necesito pongo.
¿Está bien? ¿Está bien?
Por favor.
No, digo sorry porque todo el mundo está hablando en inglés. Pues,
No, por favor.
Yo escuché mucho decir, en el caso suyo, Víctor, que cada año los niños pasan de 18 años a 18 años
Ajá.
y que está aumentando la población para votar. Pero dentro de eso está que cada año también se le están dañando los récords a esos niños que no tienen derecho a votar. ¿Qué están haciendo, por ejemplo, los electos aquí para ayudar principalmente a la juventud que le están dañando su récord por cualquier cosa? Ustedes saben que después de la ley esta de Roque, no, de Roque Center, de Roque Center, todo el mundo es criminal, especialmente los hispanos. Entonces, esos niños no pueden votar, ni tampoco pueden encontrar trabajo. Después de que tú registras el muchacho para que vote o la familia para que vote, ¿cuál es el seguimiento localmente hablando que se le está dando para que la gente se organice y comience a hacer poder? Porque sin organización no hay poder.
¿Quién lo va a contestar? Pero mira, es que la pena es, lo que te estaba diciendo, la pena es que no tenemos ningún sistema para envolver esos que se están volviendo de 18 años, lo estamos dejando perder. No hay ningún sistema puesto. No sé si ellos tienen alguna respuesta, pero ese era mi punto, que no tenemos ningún sistema para esos nenes que están volviéndose 18, que es casi 1 millón todos los años, que si nos concentramos en eso. And I will say in English for those, but we don't have a system for those that are turning 18. That's a problem. If we only concentrate on those that have 18, there is 1 million every year new voted. And we have them in the school. If we put a curriculum in the school that is cultural competence and diverse, and we engage them at the school and get them before they leave. This is how I'm going to finish the answer. Before I came here, I have a senior. She's 16, but she is a different breed. She's into politics since she was like 9. She knows why she's voting for what. She writes to the Congress all of the time, and she's suspect. But anyway, they have a state commissioner that went to her office to do a presentation to the classroom. And I asked her, how can I get kids to vote? She's like, I don't have the answer, but what I know is that we have a state representative that came to our classroom the other day, and now all the kids that were 18 were going out to vote. That's what it took for a state representative. We don't know his issues. That just went to the classroom and said to the 18 years old, hey, I'm running for this. And now the kids that were there 18, oh, I know somebody. I'm going to go to vote. But they don't know the issues. That's scary. That is scary.
Pero otra cosa
Déjame moverme para otra pregunta. So, voter restoration, right? Restoration. Para devolver los derechos a la gente. So, in Puerto Rico, people vote even when they're in jail.
Yeah.
Because we're, a civilized one. We have 8-hour day, all kind of good things, maternity leave since 1945.
Wow.
Okay, that kind of thing that we bring in here. Sometimes when I have conversations with people here, I said, we're bringing good ideas. But you prefer to give the money to very progressive people that don't take showers, money, but they don't talk to us.
And we're clean.
You understand what I mean? So in the voting restoration, they want the Puerto Ricans to vote in a constitutional amendment in Florida. But guess what? They came to Puerto Rican organization at the end, after they dispersed all the money around.
That's right.
Then they went to talk to me.
That's exactly right.
And that made me mad.
That's exactly right.
And I'm pissed off. And what we have to do is surprise them in the first election that we have the opportunity, which is in August.
Yeah.
the county that the Puerto Ricans are not gonna get elected, we need to do that. I have a question. Here, and then.
I'm going to stand up because I don't have a very strong voice. Thank you for the question about our youth. As a retired educator, that has been I'm not very knowledgeable in politics, but been thinking a lot about everything you have shared here. I'm thinking deeply about how do we reach out to our youth, our high school kids about to finish high school, whether they finish or not. One of the things that most, not all, but most adolescents are invested in time especially, is sports, sports clubs, sports. How can you reach out to them through these sports clubs that they belong to or groups that they belong, even in the local, what is the kind of English? Where they go and play with their friends and neighbors and tell them, just talk, not educate on the level that you're educating us here. Do you know all of this? That if you really vote, this is how you write, this is what you can get, this is how your community can advance, how the sports in your community can move forward. We have to deal with the population on the level and interest that they have.
Exactly.
So, go to the point, go to the point of consultants and the others on the other side. They don't want us to start doing that correctly because it will have an impact on what they're selling. What they're selling is some other stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just had last Sunday a softball tournament. 10 teams came to play together. About 200 people in the park for a whole day. People could come here. You talk to 200 people in one day. We registered 30 people. 30 people, young people, and people that like sport, they will never come to this meeting.
And to that point, there's nothing that precludes any of us from doing that at any time.
Yeah.
So if you don't have an organization, you don't have a title, you don't have, it's not your job. You can go to your county registrar, grab 100 registrations and go. There's always these sort of tactics that are available.
And let me say something about the youth because UnidosUS just launched, National Council and now UnidosUS just launched on March a curriculum for high school called Power of 18. The concept is to register 18 people, of each kid will help registering another 18 when they turn 18. But there's a curriculum with it. I haven't had the chance to put my eyes and review it, but there's a.
It's available to any high school. And I'll take it to another level. And this may be something you may be interested in. Besides the curriculum, thank you, Victor, for the
Power of 18.
You all would have access to. We are very interested about doing a training for this new level of leadership to do this work in the community, whether they're associated with one of our organizations or not, in the Northeast somewhere. So if Hartford or Newark or any of your communities are interested in doing that, if we can get a critical mass of people together for a half a day, then we can go out and do that and we'll cover the expenses. So, okay.
Yes.
I'd like to go.
Yes.
I'd like to touch upon the other side of the coin.
We got an organization.
We're all talking about registering, right? So this is where it really counts.
That's right.
You have to vote.
That's right.
So my question to the panel is this: how do you translate the registered voters into people coming out to actually vote? Because my understanding is that Hispanics overall has one of the lowest voter turnouts.
In the United States.
In order for the young lady to be in her position as a councilwoman, she had to get people to come out to vote. I mean, that's where you draw the line, from registration to actually voting. So I would like to hear from the panelists your strategy that you've used to get people to come out, what things that you feel that needs to be done to get people to actually come from work, come from home, to actually vote. And the last thing is with Florida. You had so many people that was transplanted into Orlando. I would like to know if you've ever done a study of who registered and how many of those actually voted. And so it's all about turnout.
Exactly.
You got to get out there and vote. To register 1 million people, but if only 10,000 voted, you're really not making any impact. So what are the strategies you think?
I think we have made.
Yeah, I was gonna say canvas. That door knocking is critical. There's nothing better than actually talking to people face to face for them to meet the potential candidate or just to talk to your neighbor, right? And so that is critical. That's the one way you're going to get people to turn out to vote.
And just to add to that to the woman's point in the back, that you also have to utilize the tools that are available as it relates to data management, because not only can it gives you a sense of where these people are at, how frequently they vote, which tailors your message, but also holds us accountable. Because it's one thing for an activist to say, oh, I got my whole neighborhood to vote. But Wildaliz, because and Victor and Jimmy, because we just have an understanding of the systems, we're able to produce numbers that can show the progress that we're making in the community, so we can hold ourselves accountable to this. So that's some of our initial thoughts. But Jeffrey, you got to connect with our people where they're at.
Giovanni, Jonathan, Jason, and Chungo, are you sure you want to do it? And ask a question. Okay, question. We know each other. So, Giovanni.
So I just want to point out another way we can get young people to get involved in this, and I've talked about this with Jimmy, is getting known celebrities to join in on the TAC, and not only have them talk about this and support, but also eventually, hopefully get events in the whole thing, like something like Somos or something like that, where we can probably get a bunch of celebrities who want to join in, and you know, young people, some of them want to be in this, some of them just don't know enough to get involved, and I think that's a great way to say, hey, I definitely want to go to this event, you know, so is in this event, and then somehow join that into what we want to do, and then have the candidates be there, or, you know, I'm brainstorming right now, but it's a way that, you know, we could get them to join in, that I could help a lot.
I love the idea. The only thing is, like in a community like Lorain, the only one will come is the mascot from McDonald's. Because of the honest, you invite Yellow to Lorain, Ohio, come on, like, and then you do it in New York. So here again, you do it in New York, you're missing all that vote that is spread out into a small community. You know, you're doing it. So I like the idea, and it's a great idea if we can be sure that every Latino in the United States kids can get some point of reference, whether it's through media, YouTube, whatever it is. But the idea is absolutely amazing.
I want to recommend anyone here that wants to become a community leader to read a book by El Centro. Mi nombre es Gilberto Gerena Valentín. My name is Gilberto Gerena Valentín. That's a, you know, great book in how this New York was organized, thinking out of the box. Okay, that's what we need to do. We need to think out of the box. What we're saying is that let's bring those people. So it might be Ruben Rodriguez from Bayamón, you know, the team that won 5 titles in a row in Puerto Rico. That's history. Ruben Rodriguez or Raymond Dalmau, you know, they could come for a while. But no. New people.
Those are old.
Don't think that about validators, which is what you're pointing out, right? Like young people need validators to get them engaged. So you can think about that on a macro or on a micro scale, right?
That's right.
One of the things that we identified, and I know Jimmy from Florida, I did a lot of campaigns in Florida for like 20 years. And one of the things we realized was that abuela, mamá is a validator, right? So if mamá says, la familia va a votar, then you see more traction in the household, and you see more numbers turning out to vote, because you reach the validator in the community. So Latino women are so critical in this. If we're looking at our kids and saying the kids aren't voting, Mama has a responsibility in a lot of ways to mobilize the family in that direction. So if we're talking about the kids, we also have to talk about the parents and that responsibility.
Gerena organized based on the town that the people came from Puerto Rico. Okay? That's the idea.
Let me say, because that's a great idea. I would like to see the Puerto Rican agenda follow up, but another idea for the Puerto Rican agenda is to create an advisory board or a board made out of teenagers and or young people like you. And I would recommend that you are one of those. And even my daughter from Ohio, but create the Agenda Latina should get into the business of creating an advisory young council or something.